Humans fear war, the Galactic Council declared. Until reality hit them, Ambassador Elena Bance stood alone in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, a vast space that could have swallowed a cathedral. The room was designed to make the petitioners feel small, and it succeeded. 12 platforms rose around her in a perfect circle, each bearing representatives of the most ancient and powerful species in the known galaxy. The platforms floated 10 feet above the floor, forcing her to look up at them, forcing her into the posture of supplication. Strange lights hovered in the air above her head. Bioluminescent organisms harvested from the deep sea of some forgotten world pulsed to the rhythm of the emotional resonance of those present. A living indicator of the mood. The walls were made of Valorian crystal, a material that grew instead of to be built, programmed at a molecular level to change color according to the collective mood, music, of the room. Right now, the glass glowed a dull, lifeless gray. They weren't taking her, music, seriously. Again, Elena had been there 6 times before. Each time, music, she had come with a warning about the territorial expansion of the Kravari Empire. Each time she had presented evidence, offered solutions, pleaded for intervention. Each time she had been politely dismissed. The first visit had been nervous, music, overwhelmed by the grandeur and the weight of the alien eyes upon, music, her. The second had been hopeful, believing that if she presented the facts clearly enough, they would listen. The third, music, frustration began to creep in. By the 6th, she could barely contain her rage. Now, music, on her 7th appearance, Elena felt only a cold, crystalline, music, certainty about what was coming. The council had already chosen. They would dismiss her again, and then events would unfold for which none of them were prepared. Ambassador advance. A voice echoed through the chamber. High Arbitrator Silton, the Veloxy representative, music, spoke with the slow, measured cadence of someone who had lived 3 centuries. His body was slender and impossibly tall, covered in silver scales, music, that caught the light from floating organisms. His eyes were completely, music, black, without pupils, reflective pools that seemed to absorb rather than emit when he spoke. His voice had an odd quality, as if the sound came from everywhere and nowhere at once. He appears before us again with the same concerns he has raised on 6 previous occasions, music. The Kravari Empire has expanded, music, its borders, claimed 3 systems that your species, music, also claims. This is not unusual in galactic affairs. Borders shift, species adapt, resources are redistributed. Such is the galaxy. It has been for 1,000,000 years. Elena kept her voice calm and professional. Music, she had rehearsed that presentation dozens of times, polishing every word, anticipating every objection. High Referee, music, with all due respect, the Kravari have not merely claimed those systems. They have announced their formal intention, music, to expel the human colonists from 3 densely populated worlds. New Hyderabad is home to 40 million people. Haven Rest has 12, music, million. Port has 8 million. These are not disputed mining asteroids or, music, empty outposts. These are established colonies with cities, schools, music, farms, families. These are our homes. 60 million, music, people have been given 60 days to abandon everything they have built. A sound came from one of the upper platforms, slicing through the camera like a blade. It was something like a laugh, but deeper, more resonant. Tinted with cruelty, Ambassador Kravari was enjoying himself. The war orchestrator Texran rose to his full height on his platform, and Elena was reminded again why the Kravari had never lost a territorial dispute. Texran stood nearly 10 feet tall. His body was a mass of muscle and bone covered in black skin, like armor that looked as if carved from obsidian. 4 arms extended from his massive shoulders, each ending in hands capable of crushing steel. His face was angular and sharp, all hard planes and predatory edges. When he smiled, and he did, he revealed rows of teeth made for tearing. Hearts can be moved, little human, Texran said. His voice was harsh, like ground stone, like tectonic plates shifting. Yours are soft, they'll be gone when we arrive. They always do. Every species flees from the Kravari. It's the natural order. The strong take what they want. The weak adapt or perish. Yours will adapt by moving. It's not complicated. Elena turned to face him. She was small compared to him, small compared to almost every other species present. The average human was shorter, lighter, and physically weaker than most galactic civilizations, but she didn't lower her gaze. She didn't show the deference he expected. "We have requested diplomatic talks," she said, her voice projecting clearly through the vast space. "We have proposed resource-sharing agreements that would benefit both species. We have offered compromises on every point of contention. We have suggested third-party mediation. We have offered economic incentives. Your empire has rejected each and every one of our offers. You haven't even acknowledged our attempts at communication." Run's smile widened, and something predatory flashed in his eyes. "Why negotiate over something we can simply take? Why share what we can possess? Your species speaks of justice and compromise, as if those concepts had any meaning. They don't. There is only strength and weakness. We are strong, you are weak, therefore you move." High Arbitrator Hilton raised a thin, scaly hand in a gesture that called for calm, for peace. "War orator. Let us maintain decorum in this chamber." He turned his black eyes toward Elena. "Ambassador, advance. The Council has studied your species with considerable care since first contact 2 centuries ago. We have observed your history. Analyzed your culture, examined your collective psychology. We have access to your literature, your art, your philosophy. We have observed your behavior in diplomatic situations over dozens of interactions. I do not say this to dismiss your concerns, but to assure you that we understand humans quite well." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. It was the same feeling I had before bad news, before a crisis, before violence. The feeling that everything was about to change, and that he asked carefully, thinking he understood us. Silton's expression, difficult to read in his alien features, seemed almost compassionate. "Humans fear war, Ambassador. It's not a criticism, it's simply an obvious fact in everything your species creates. Your literature is full of cautionary tales about the horrors of combat. You write thousands of stories about the psychological damage that violence inflicts. Your soldiers return even from minor conflicts with what you call post-traumatic stress, their minds broken by experiences that other species would consider routine military action. You build monuments to those who die in conflict, entire structures dedicated to mourning your losses. Music, their children are taught from a very young age that violence is morally, wrong, that fighting is shameful, that aggression must be avoided at all costs. Their leaders sign peace treaty after peace treaty, seeking diplomatic solutions to problems that other species would resolve by force. Their entire civilization is built around avoiding conflict. Music," she paused, letting her words settle on the chamber. The other, members of the council nodded. They had heard that analysis before. They agreed. "They are, a traumatized species," Silson continued in a tone that was perhaps meant to be gentle. "At some point in their evolutionary past, or perhaps in their early civilization, they experienced violence so terrible, that it shattered something fundamental in their collective psyche. Now, they cannot fight. The very concept of war fills them with existential dread. They avoid it not out of wisdom, but out of pathological fear. It is not an insult. Ambassador Vans. Many species develop similar patterns. Some beings are simply not made for conflict. There's no shame in that. It's simply a fact of their nature." Elena, stood very still. Around her, representatives of other species nodded and murmured in agreement. She could see it in their eyes, in their postures, in the way they had already turned their attention away from her. They had made their decision long before she arrived. They thought they understood music, humanity. They had studied human culture, human art, human history. They had examined the evidence and drawn their conclusions. They understood nothing. "High Arbitrator," Elena said. And something in her voice made several advisors turn to look at her again. "I must tell you that your analysis is incomplete." Silton made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "We have studied you, music, for 200 years. Ambassador. Our sociologists are the best in the galaxy. Our psychological models, music, have analyzed thousands of hours of human cultural production. Our analysis is exhaustive. They've studied our words," Elena said softly. "They've analyzed our art. They've examined our poetry and our philosophy, but they haven't studied our history. Not really, not in detail. They've skimmed the surface and drawn conclusions from shadows." There was a moment of silence. Then she laughed again. That deep, harsh sound seemed to vibrate in the ground. "What a story, little human. We know your story. You fought small tribal wars on your small planet. You killed each other with primitive weapons of stone and metal. Your conflicts were brief and limited. Then you developed space travel and stopped fighting as soon as you discovered other species stronger than yourselves. You learned your place in the galactic hierarchy. You stopped fighting because you realized you couldn't win. Because you're afraid." Elena turned to the war orator. His expression didn't change. His voice remained calm. But something in his eyes, something ancient and cold, made the enormous warrior Kravari paused for barely a moment. Perhaps it reminded him that humans were classified as persistent predators, that their eyes were at the front of their skulls, that their teeth, small as they were omnivorous, that they came from a world where survival required qualities other than size and strength. "We didn't stop fighting because we were afraid," Elena said. And now her voice was very low, very precise. "We stopped fighting because we had to, because if we had continued down the path we were on, there would have been no one left to fight. No one at all." She scanned the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of each representative, one by one, making sure they understood that what she was about to say was neither metaphor nor exaggeration. "In the last great war of our world," Elena said, "we killed 80 million of our own. Not through centuries of sporadic conflict, music, not through generations of tribal feuds. In 6 years of industrial-scale slaughter, music, we developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single flash of light. Weapons that poisoned the earth itself for generations. We built machines that could kill thousands of people, music, from the other side of the planet, and we used them. We used them against ourselves. We burned our own, music, cities, poisoned our own land. We killed our own children by the millions." The chamber was silent. Even Texran had stopped laughing. The floating lights above had shifted to a restless orange-yellow. The glass, music, walls were darkening. "After that war," Elena continued, her voice heavy with the weight of cemeteries. "We looked at what we had become. Music, we looked at the ashes of our cities and the bones of our children, and we chose, music, as a species. We chose to build a different future. We wrote poetry about peace because we had seen too much war. We built monuments to the dead because we never wanted to forget the price of violence. We taught our children that aggression is wrong because we didn't want them to be what we had been." She paused, and the silence stretched out. "But we didn't forget how to fight. We didn't lose the capacity for violence. We didn't become weak or broken. We simply chose not to use those capacities. We chose to lock the monster away. Each generation teaches the next how to keep it locked away. We have been doing this for over a century, and we have done it very, very well." Silton waved a thin hand, though the gesture lacked its former confidence. "Nice words. Ambassador, inspiring rhetoric, but words don't win wars. Philosophy doesn't defend territories. The Council has heard your statements and taken them into consideration. The vote has now been taken. The Kravari Empire will be granted territorial adjustment rights over the disputed music systems. Its colonists will have 60 days to evacuate. This matter is closed. Music, you may return to your people and inform them of the council's decision. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Music, she looked at them all, at those beings who thought they understood the galaxy, who thought they had seen everything, who thought they knew what humanity was. Very well, she said, I will inform my government of your decision. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. Her posture was upright, her music step measured. She did not hurry, she did not appear defeated before the enormous doors. Music, she paused and looked over her shoulder. High Arbiter said, I want you to remember something. When this is over, when you are, music, trying to understand what happened and why, I want you to remember that I came here 7 times, 7 different times. Music, I asked for help, I offered peace, I presented alternatives. Music, I gave them every opportunity to choose a different path. I warned them clearly and repeatedly of what, music, would happen if they ignored us and they didn't listen. Remember that. Remember, music, that we tried. And she left. The doors slammed shut behind her with a sound like thunder. Silton turned to his colleagues. Several looked uneasy. The glass, music, walls reflected their disquiet with shifting colors. One dramatic exit observed, though his voice lacked conviction, but ultimately it was meaningless. The humans will file formal complaints, appeal the decision through official channels, exhaust all diplomatic options, and then, when, music, they realize they have no alternative, they will abandon their colonies. They have no choice. They cannot fight the Kravari Empire. They have not fought anyone. Music, not in 200 years of galactic interaction. Zexran stood up from his platform, already dismissing humans from his, music, thoughts. He had invasions to plan, territories to claim, warriors to organize. 60 million soft, music, and scared humans, he said, his voice thick with satisfaction. They will flee at the first sight of our warships. They will abandon their homes without a single shot being fired. It will be the easiest conquest in Kravari history. We won't even have to deploy ground forces, music, they will simply leave. But on the platform to his right, a crystalline, music, advisor named Berezin remained silent. Berezin was old, even by the council's standards, music, and had seen the rise and fall of a dozen civilizations. Something about the human ambassador's last words troubled him, the way she had said, when this is over. No, yes. As if the outcome were already decided, as if she knew something they didn't. On the other side of the galaxy, beneath the Swiss Alps, in a bunker hewn from solid rock and protected by enough shielding and countermeasures to survive a direct nuclear strike, a secure communication arrived from ambassador bands. The message had been encrypted in 6 different ways, compressed, broken into fragments, and routed through a dozen repeater stations. It arrived exactly 30 seconds after Elena had left the council chamber. Military commanders gathered around a screen in the bunker's central command room. Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen read the message silently, his weathered face expressionless. Around him, 5 other senior officers waited. They already knew what he would say. They had been waiting for it for weeks. The council has rejected all diplomatic options, Admiral Chen read aloud. The Kravari, music, have been granted legal authority to take our colonies. A 60, music, day evacuation order has been issued. There will be no intervention. The council believes we will not resist. Music, they believe we cannot resist. They believe, music, we will simply leave. Ambassador Bands recommends proceeding to final authorization. All other options have been exhausted. She looked up from the screen. Opinions. General Sarah Middle, head of Strategic Command, spoke first. We have simulated this scenario 47, music, times in the last 5 years. The political calculation has not changed. If we retreat, we will be seen, music, as weak. Every expansionist power in the galaxy will begin to set its sights on our territories. Music, if we fight and lose, we are finished. If we fight and win, but with massive casualties, we undermine our own stability. There is only one option that maintains our position. A complete and crushing victory with minimal casualties, concluded Admiral Chen. I know. I helped design the scenarios. Director of Colonial Affairs James Park looked pale. We're talking about 60 million civilians. The logistics alone are already planned. Admiral Chen interrupted. We've had evacuation protocols ready for decades. Every colony has underground concentration areas. Every family has an assigned departure time. We can get them all off the world in 3 weeks. And then what? Asked Park. We have 60 million refugees with nowhere to go. They go to secure facilities in the outer territories, said General Mitchell. We've been building them for 70 years. They're not comfortable, but they're secure, and they won't be there for long. Fleet Admiral Chen had dreaded this moment his entire career. He was 63. He had spent 4 decades in uniform, waiting, praying, never to have to do what he was about to do. The vault behind him had haunted his dreams, every admiral before him had passed on the sealed orders, and each had hoped never to have to open them. For 80 years, those orders had remained untouched, a weapon of last resort. So terrible, its very existence a top-level secret, he rose and walked toward the vault. The heavy door required 3 distinct methods of authentication, his palm print verified against his current biometrics, his retinal scan matched against patterns. That changed naturally with age to prevent impersonation, and a code known only to him, which was changed with each new commander and was never written down, never recorded, never spoken aloud, except at the instant of authentication. Admiral Chen placed his hand on the scanner. A green light bathed his palm. He leaned forward for the retinal scan. A red laser blinked over his eye. He entered the code with his fingers moving with rehearsed precision across the keypad. The vault door clicked. The heavy magnetic catches released. The multi-ton door swung open silently on perfectly balanced hinges. Inside, a small, empty vault, save for a single object, was a folder. It was made of some synthetic material designed to last for centuries. It bore a word printed on it in red letters that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Prometheus. Music. Admiral Chen had imagined this moment many times. In his imagination, his hands always trembled, he always hesitated, he always felt something, fear, sorrow, or uncertainty. But now, standing, music, with the folder in his hands, he felt only a deep, cold calm, a sense of inevitability. The galaxy had already chosen. Now humanity would choose. He opened the folder. Inside were detailed operational plans spanning thousands of pages, fleet movement orders, target priorities, rules of engagement, music, contingency protocols, communication strategies, everything necessary to execute a military operation of overwhelming complexity. And at the top, handwritten, music, by some admiral who had died decades ago, were 2 words, music, that encapsulated the entire philosophy of what humanity would become if pushed beyond all limits. Without pity, Admiral Chen stared at those words for a long moment. Then he closed the folder, returned it to the table, and placed it in front of the other officers. Prometheus is active, he said quietly. The room fell completely silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Every officer there had studied the Prometheus protocols. They had all participated in drills and simulations, but knowing about Prometheus in theory was different from seeing it activated in reality. General Middle broke the silence. Authorization code, Alpha 779 Delta, Admiral Chen whispered. Confirmed, Middle said, tapping her fingers on her personal terminal. Initiating Protocol Omega. Fleet Alert Level 7. How much time do we have? The Kravari have given our colonists 60 days to evacuate. That gives us 50 days and 8 days before I train, 50 days and 8 days to evacuate civilians and position our forces. More than enough, Michel said in a firm, professional voice, betraying the weight he must be feeling. I'll have the fleets ready in 48 hours. Full battle groups, every ship we have. Admiral Chen confidently picked up the phone and made his second call. Director Park, in Colonial Affairs, answered on the first ring. James, we're executing a full evacuation of New Hyderabad, and we're shutting down Haven and Port Shone. Prometheus is active. There was a long silence on the other end. How much can I tell them? Park asked for a moment. Tell them the truth. Tell them we're bringing them home. Tell them we're not abandoning the colonies. Tell them we're clearing them. Clearing them for what? For what comes next? Park fell silent again. Marcus, their families, children, elderly people. Some have lived on those worlds for decades. They've built entire lives there. I know. That's why we're protecting them. Music, that's why we do this. Starting a war, ending one before it even begins, Admiral, Music, Chen hung up and made his third call to the Chief of Naval Operations, then to the Marine Commandant, then to the heads of Intelligence, Special Operations, and Cyber Warfare. Each call was brief. They all used, Music, the same clearance code. By the time he finished, every branch of Earth's military was mobilizing across human space. In secret shipyards hidden in the darkness between stars, far from trade routes and prying eyes, lights began to come on. Those facilities, Music, had been decades in the making, built in secret and funded by black budgets that existed only in encrypted files. No, Music, other species knew they existed. They didn't appear on any star chart. They were, Music, phantoms, shadows, possibilities the galaxy had never imagined. Music, the shipyards housed vessels that had never been registered with any authority, Music, ships built to specifications that would have alarmed the Galactic Council. Warships designed not for defense or patrol, but for, Music, an overwhelming offensive. Engines that had been cold for decades began to heat up. Music, reactor cores going from standby to operational state. Weapon systems that had never been fired outside of computer simulations underwent, Music, their first real tests, and the results were exactly what the designers had promised. Terrible, accurate, unstoppable. At a military base on Mars, in a barracks housing the 4th Expeditionary Battalion. Captain, Music, David Torres sat in his quarters staring at the message on his console. He had hoped never to see those words. Music, every soldier hopes never to see those words. Report to Hangar 7. Music, full combat deployment. Prometheus clearance. Torres was 32. He'd enlisted at 18. Son and grandson of soldiers. His entire career had been training for a war he hoped would never come. He'd studied tactics and strategy. He'd learned 100 ways to kill and 1,000 ways to survive. He'd run simulations of every possible combat scenario, but he'd never fired in a fit of rage. No human in uniform had. Not for over a century. That was about to change. He stood up, put on his uniform, checked his equipment. Every movement was automatic, ingrained by years of repetition, but his mind was racing. This was real. It was happening. Somewhere in human space. Someone had decided that talking was over, that humanity wouldn't be pushed around anymore. He walked through the base's corridors. Other soldiers were moving in the same direction, all toward their assigned hangars. Music, no one was speaking. Everyone knew what Prometheus meant. Every human in uniform had been taught it since the first day of basic training. The last, Music, resort, the last option, the Music, thing you use when everything else has failed. In Hangar 7, his squadron was waiting for him. 12 pilots, Music, all people he'd trained with for years, they knew each other's families. They'd celebrated birthdays and promotions together. They trusted each other with their lives. Now they would trust each other with theirs in actual combat. "Attention," Captain Torres said, his voice echoing a little in the vast hangar space. "I'm not going to give you a speech